Hello and welcome to the Second Tier podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by Norwich's marketing team to all the other marketing teams. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
If you don't understand that joke, just have a little Google. Justin, how are you? Are you excited for the Euros?
I am. I've stuck on my Italy shirt. I think it's the only international shirt I own in an adult size. I don't think I bought an England shirt since I was about 12.
No, but I've still got mine and I might have to get it out at some point. This is obviously coming out on Sunday, so it may very well be the case that people have seen the England v Croatia game by this point. So I hope everyone enjoyed England giving them one hell of a beating. Did you see Phil Foden's wonder goal, Justin? Oh, it was amazing.
It's like Gaza.
Oh, it really was. I have no idea what Jordan Pickford was doing for that goal, though. That one's a bit too real, isn't it? You are listening to the biggest championship-specific podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Justin, you're a Derby fan. Is your club in the market for some new players?
Yeah, I think so. Plenty of them, I reckon.
If they've got any money. Have you thought about recommending to them free agent Tinder? Yes, that's right, folks. That's what we're doing today. We're going to go through a load of players who are free agents and decide which championship clubs should be swiping right. For anyone who doesn't know what Tinder is, that means that you should be getting them. I've compiled a big old list of players who are free agents or look set to be free agents at the time of recording. Even chucked in a few Premier League players in there, Justin, just to keep it interesting. Nice. And we'll see whether or not we think they'll be able to do a job in the championship and whether they could potentially be coming to a club near you very soon. This list is completely random, Justin. So let's get swiping. So we've opened up the app. It's looking around to see who's available. And first up is Alex Mowat, formerly of Barnsley. Justin, are you swiping right?
Of course I'm swiping right. It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
How far right are you swiping?
Is there a super like button or a super right?
Yes, like? You can super like if you want. I would also be super liking Alex Mowat. The problem is with this, Justin, I feel like Alex Mowat is so bloody good that he's not going to be in the championship next season, is he?
Maybe not, but I think Barnsley are fairly confident of keeping him around. So,
well, is that the case?
That is the case. They're fairly confident they'll keep hold of him. But I know there are a lot of clubs sniffing around him. I think Blackburn have been heavily interested, but they might just be Twitter rumors. But in terms of ability, this guy is top of the crop in terms of free agents from championship clubs, especially with the form he displayed last season. He's a quality player, and getting him on a free transfer is a steal, bargain. Every superlative,
massively.
Yeah,
massively. Well, I'd be surprised if Premier League clubs aren't looking at them, and if they're not, then they bloody should be, because the season, when you've got a player who's still mid-20s coming off the season that he's just had, you should be just throwing money at him, saying, come join us in the Premier League. So that's a big old right swipe from the both of us on Mr. Mowat. Next up on the pile, Justin, is Andre Ayew. Now, this is another one who I look at and I think I'll be surprised if he is in the championship next season, because he is on some big old wages, isn't he? But
yeah,
where do you think he will end up, Mr. Ayew?
Oh, that's a great question, because I mean, he's 31. Will a Premier League club take him? He might go and join his brother at Palace. He might want to go back to the south of France to Marseille. He might fancy another stint in Turkey. There'll be plenty of clubs lining up for Andre Ayew because of his ability. He was clearly too good for the championship, and I think having, no disrespect to Swansea, but having top level players around him will get more out of him in some sense, which just goes to show how good he is.
Oh yeah, massively. I agree with you. I don't think we'll be seeing him in England. Probably, I can see him definitely going abroad. But if a Premier League club fancied, forking out for him, it would not be the worst bit of business at all. Let's quickly move on, Justin, because we've got a hell of a lot to go through. Michael Dawson.
Are we swiping left or right on Andre? We didn't even go through the.
I think what we'll say is on Mr. Ayew that we're going to swipe left just because we can't afford him.
He's out of our league. Yeah.
Yeah, he is out of our league. It'd be nice if he was in our league, and we might swipe right in hope, but it's more out of hope than expectation. Next up is Michael Dawson, formerly of Forest. What are you saying on old Dawson? He's very experienced, isn't he, at this level?
Oh, clearly, he's one of the most experienced players that he's still actively playing. He's not retired yet. Injury record is a bit sketchy. Yeah, not many appearances over the last 2 seasons, which is a massive shame because I love the romance of former players going back to their clubs, their old clubs that they started at. So even as a Derby fan, I wanted this to be fantastic, and it was to some extent, but it didn't quite go the way anybody wanted it to, just down to injuries. But I think based on experience alone, yeah, you might take him, but he's not going to get many games, is he? Maybe a player coach deal.
Well, that's pretty much what he was at Forest, wasn't it? I'm not sure if he actually was doing any coaching at Forest, but he was almost like a locker room leader, wasn't he? As opposed to actually a leader out on the pitch.
Yeah, I saw, I don't know if you saw them, but all the bench cam videos that they put out. And Michael Dawson, without fail, was up out of the bench clapping and applauding and shouting. So he was pretty much a motivational speaker. Maybe, I don't know how much influence he had on the training ground, but definitely a transition to a coaching job. I think maybe a player coach role might be the best route for him. And for that reason, I would swipe right.
What, as a championship club?
I think so. Yeah, there are teams that have got inexperienced squads that might need a player of his experience coming in, player of his age, and as well as that, having him on the bench, it's still quite surprising that Forest have let him go. But then again, I think Houghton's just reshaping everything. But someone like Coventry, for example, who do have an inexperienced side. They play a back three, so that's going to cover a lot of his Dawson's weaknesses in a back three, as it always does. So yeah, I think he still could do a shift, maybe for 10 games at a championship club. So yeah, that's quite right.
I'm not convinced. I think he would be a very good person to have in the changing room, but I could definitely see him dropping down a couple of divisions. Maybe if he did want to keep playing, it all depends what he wants to do, really, I suppose, doesn't it? He's the kind of person who I could see being a manager eventually. So it wouldn't surprise me if he starts taking that step into coaching now. And it does very much depend on what is offered to him, but I can't see him being offered a championship playing role, I've got to say. Next up on the agenda, Justin, is Liam Walsh. Now, this is one player who we were very surprised to see become a free agent, because midfielder, he was on loan at Coventry last season, once he won the season before the one that's just gone, and was absolutely fantastic in League One with the Sky Blues. Went to Bristol City this season. We thought he would have more of a starring role. Hasn't really played at all. That is partly down to injuries. But from what I've seen, there have been plenty of clubs interested in his services. And I'm not particularly surprised, because he would be one hell of a pickup on a free, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, he would. He's got potential. Obviously, returning on loan from Coventry, going back into Bristol City. I think I said that he'd have a big season this season for Bristol City, and it hasn't really panned out for him, which is a massive shame for Bristol City and for him, because we all know what he can do. He showed it on his loan spell at Coventry. So yeah, I think Swansea were linked heavily, and I think it's just down to the player now as to who he chooses, because he's got plenty of offers. And as a central midfielder, he can be creative. He can score goals. He's a player you want, who's going to progress play into the final third quite nicely, and he's a good engine as well. So he's got what you need for an attacking midfielder or attacking central midfielder. So yeah, definitely swipe right. It's just those injuries, whether they creep back in or not. That's the question.
Yeah, well, he can create something out of nothing, can't he? He's a real spark in the middle of the park. I think he'd be a fantastic pickup for any championship club, to be quite frank, which is why I was surprised that Bristol City let go of him. But he'll be a fantastic signing for someone. So a big old swipe right from the two of us on that one. Next up is Jordan Cousins, who's been let go by Stoke. Hasn't really played too much this season. And judging from your face, Justin, you don't seem to be too tempted to swipe right.
He's a combative midfielder who I know who has, again, he's another player who's had a fair few injuries, but it's not really worked out for him at Stoke. I was surprised that he went to Stoke. Obviously, Nathan Jones brought him in. QPR fans weren't overly disappointed to see him go. He's just a player who hasn't quite lived up to the potential that surrounded him when he was at Charlton. I think he could probably do with a season or two down in League One. Maybe going back to Charlton again. That romance of going back to your first club is there for me. So of course I'm going to endorse that sort of move. But yeah, I'd swipe no, just because he's had a couple of seasons or quite a few seasons at Championship level, and it's not really worked out for him yet. So I think he still needs a little bit more experience, come back up the leagues, and it'd be a couple of £1 million.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when he was at Charlton, he was being linked with Spurs, I think, for something like 8 figures. So the fact that he's not really lived up to that potential is sad to see. But I mean, there must be at least something there. But I agree with you. If I'm a Championship club, I'm swiping left, I'm afraid. Next up is Connor Wickham. This is a very interesting one. I think he has actually been linked with a move to Middlesbrough and probably a host of other Championship clubs, because he seems to be that perennial linked to different Championship clubs all the time. But what's your first instinct on Mr. Wickham?
The gasp, I think, is a good summary of Connor Wickham, because he's such a good player. He is. When he gets to running games, he's a good player. I think it was one of Palace's escape from relegations a few seasons ago, where he was a key part in it. And then he got injured and he was out for a long time. And it's just been repeat for him in that sense, where he has a good run of form, gets injured, and then that's it. I think, was it a loan spell at Wednesday last season or the season before last now?
It was. He was there for the second half of the season, Monty, and did quite well. Didn't score a hat load, but considering this is a guy who hasn't played too much first-team football, then you'd look at it, and just going on to which way I'm swiping, I'd be swiping well right, because I think for Middlesbrough in particular, a club which has desperately been lacking a striker who can get double figures last season, I think it'd be a fantastic signing for Borough.
I just think it's a massive gamble because of his injury record. And I'm so because it's been a long time where he's had these injuries. It's literally been for the past 5 years, 5 or 6 years, where he's picked these injuries up, which is why he's never really lived up to the potential that he developed at Ipswich. Did well at Sunderland, but again, it's not really worked out for him. For a Championship club, it would be a good pickup on a free transfer, but that's only if you're paying him less than 10 grand a week, I'd hope, or maybe even a performance-based contract, because as I say, he's not played enough games over the last 5 or 6 years. So it's a tentative swipe right, mainly because you can get something out of him, but I'm not going, oh yeah, bring him in. Let's swipe right. Let's get him in.
I am doing that. I'm swiping right, telling him to get him in. I think you say you won't be willing to pay him over 10 grand a week. I probably would. I think he's worth the risk, because if you do manage to keep him fit, then you've got one hell of a player on your hands. Even when he was at Palace and he was in the Premier League, when he did actually play, he's done a pretty decent job. So
yeah, that's true.
If you just manage to keep him out of the injury room, then my God, at Championship level, he could be a beast. He really, really could. So I'm swiping right. Are you swiping right, did you say?
It's a tentative swipe right. I'm not sure about him.
Speculative swipe right. See how it goes when you start chatting to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Next one is Barry Douglas.
Okay.
Now, he was on loan at Blackburn last season. His parent club was Leeds, which is a move that never really worked out, really, did it? And he's now being let go on a free. If you're a Championship side, would you be looking at Barry Douglas?
I think I would. I know we from afar, it doesn't look like his move worked out. But when we were doing the team of the seasons a few weeks ago, and I was looking at stats for left backs, Barry Douglas was quite high. He's good in his one-on-one duels. I think the reason why perhaps we snuffed at him a little bit was because going forward he wasn't as productive as he was at Wolves or even Leeds when he did play for Leeds. But I think for a free transfer, he's an experienced player. He still can do a job at Championship level. I'd be swiping right. Absolutely. And his left foot is dynamite. It is very good left foot. That picture there, he's taken a corner.
Well,
We don't
he's
know what's
fantastic
happened.
on set pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be an awful set piece,
Exactly.
but he is very good at set pieces and he's fantastic at crossing. Experienced defender at this level. I would say if I was a mid to lower championship club, I'd be looking to get him in because I think he'd be a decent signing for an experienced head at left back. A few question marks on him defensively, but I think you can get away with it if you're willing to stump up the money for him. So swipe right from both of us on Barry Douglas. Next up is Yannick Bolasie, another one who's been linked with Middlesbrough. He was obviously on loan there last season. Would you be all over Mr. Bolasie?
Oh yeah. Again, it's a super like, isn't it? The guy's unreal. I love him. I love him a lot. Oh yeah, it's unhealthy actually. He got 7 he got 7 goal contributions for Borough. I think it was 4 goals, 3 assists, or the other way around in 15 appearances, which for a player who hasn't played a lot of football is very good going. And he always plays with a smile on his face. The way he plays as well, the way he carries himself is fantastic. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the When Eagles Dare documentary, the Palace documentary on Prime. It's very, very good. And again, Bolasie comes out very, very, very well in it when they talk about their championship season when they got promoted. But yeah, absolutely, bring him in. Need to.
I don't think I'd be super liking.
Oh, why not?
I've always been a bit sketchy over Yannick Bolasie, particularly recently, because where was he on loan before? It was Villa, wasn't it? Did he have another spell somewhere else?
It was Lisbon and Anderlecht.
Yeah, and his career just seems to have kind of nosedived a bit since that move to Everton. So I'm not particularly sold on Bolasie. I think
he did pick up a serious injury.
He did, and that's what I mean. Since that move to Everton and that serious injury, that's kind of why his career is almost stalled / nosedived. And he did all right at Middlesbrough. I think he would be a decent signing for Middlesbrough and other championship clubs who are below them. I just don't think he's a super like worthy kind of player.
The sacrilege.
But he does come across as a very good bloke. And I think he's quote tweeted the Second Tier podcast account on Twitter quite a few times. So I've got a lot of time for him. So I'm swipe right, just not super liking. Next up is Danny Rose. This one is interesting because people who are listening to this might think Danny Rose, he's not going to go to a championship club. But he was actually linked with a loan move to Middlesbrough last season. I think it was last summer. So whether it is realistic or not, I'm not actually too sure. Of course, he's been on the sidelines at Spurs for quite some time now. And it doesn't look like there are many Premier League clubs who are looking to sweep him off his feet. But would you be interested in a bit of Rose?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was the first choice left back at the 2018 World Cup for England, wasn't he?
That's quite interesting because I watched the penalty shootout of against Colombia, and Danny Rose was there, and I was just like, "Whoa!" I completely forgot about Danny Rose, and then checked to see free agent now. Why not? Why wouldn't a championship club look to get him on board if he's willing to take a pay cut?
Yeah, that would have to be a pay cut, but I think he's a player who's gone on record to say he just wants to get back to playing football because he loves playing football, and as a player, he's clearly a quality player because he's been in and around it. I mean, he was part of Spurs' best team for the last, I don't know however many years. It's been crap for them, but and the same with England. So, I mean, it would be a surprise to see him drop down into the Championship, but then again, it wouldn't be a surprise because the Championship is a place where you go to fall back in love with football. So he might be open to a move. I mean, Fulham might not be a bad shout. It's London based. I don't see why not.
Yeah, well, an experienced left back. We all know his quality. I mean, it was only 2 or 3 years ago he's been linked with a ridiculous amount of money move to Man U, Chelsea, that kind of club. And for him to be in this position now where there aren't seemingly any Premier League clubs looking to get him in is quite shocking. So Championship clubs, if you get the chance to sign Danny Rose, why wouldn't you? So yeah, that's a big old swipe right from me. Again, it's speculative. It's more out of hope than expectation, but you never know. You might be able to match with him. Next up, Adam Reach. Just been released by Sheffield Wednesday. He has had an interesting couple of seasons, hasn't he, Justin? I mean, again, another player who not too long ago was being linked with a big move for a lot of money. I think he was being linked with West Brom when they were in the Premier League. So the fact that he's now a free agent as well, what are you saying on Adam Reach?
I would say no.
Really?
I would swipe left. And the reason why I think that is because I think there was a run of games a couple of seasons ago where he was just incredible. And I think he will do that every now and then, where he scores from a ridiculous angle or from a ridiculous distance, and then that's it. He'll go quiet for a while. We've seen it on occasion. What he can do, there was a couple of games under Tony Pulis, funnily enough, last season where he was pinging balls into the box and the Wednesday strikers getting on the end of them. But I don't think he's got enough in his locker to convince me that. I mean, he probably could still do a job at championship level, but for the potential salary he's going to ask for and the output he gives, I don't think I'd fancy it. I really don't.
He's got a great left foot, hasn't he? As you kind of refer to there. And I do kind of agree with you. I think I would probably be willing to give him a go just because he has the potential to be a very handy player at this level, still in his mid-20s.
He's 28.
28, still mid-20s kind of. Experienced championship player as well. So if I was a lower championship club, I think I'd be willing to have a gamble on Adam Reach. It's just, as you say, maybe his best years are behind him. Next up on the agenda, actually, Justin, let's have a quick break. After that, we'll go through the rest of the players on Free Agent Tinder. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. We're playing a little game of Free Agent Tinder to decide which players who are out on the market at the moment will be decent pickups for championship clubs. So next up on the agenda, Justin, is Matty James, who has most recently had loan spells at Barnsley and Coventry. Was at Leicester, but hasn't played for Leicester for quite some time now. But he did all right, didn't he, at those two loan spells?
I think he did really well. I think he was quality at Barnsley. I was surprised that Barnsley was so willing to allow the loan move to end. And then when he was at Coventry, I think he transformed Coventry's season in a certain way. What he brought to their midfield was a bit of composure. He was able to boss the midfield and control games. And he had experience as well. So for me, he's a player at championship level that's still very much got it, which is again, we've talked about injuries with a couple of players. He's a player who has completely come out the other side and done really well post-injury because, again, he's had some pretty bad injuries. He's had some pretty bad ones, and the form he's displayed this season, I think he's been quality. I think even top six or side trying to get into top six might fancy him. I've got an inkling he might go. Yeah, honestly, we've seen with his set piece quality, again, his composure, he can dominate a midfield, providing he's with someone who's got a bit more legs as well. And he's still, 30? 29, 30?
Yeah. Well,
so
I'd say I wouldn't go as far to say top six. I think it'd be a fantastic signing for someone like Coventry or another mid-table championship side. He's a very good player at this level. As top six, I just need a bit more explanation on that front.
It comes down to, firstly, his experience. I mean, he's had promotions from the championship before. We know that with his time at Leicester. His composure on the ball, his set piece quality. We saw it. I mean, he put in the ball for Ostergaard to score against Rotherham to pretty much see what Coventry over the line. His form at Barnsley in the first half of the season, they were struggling at the start. They came out the other side, did really well. Went down. This comes down to mentality as well. Went to a team who were struggling in Coventry and brought them, and he was part of the process in improving them as well. So there's clearly a player there. And I think rather than fighting relegation, he's a player that deserves to be looking up because, again, he's had some bad luck. So for me, I think a team who is fighting for the top six could do with an experienced general in the side like Matthew James.
I think more mid-table. I think Coventry, if they managed to get him back, they'd be probably challenging for mid-table next season anyway. So that's the kind of area I'm going for. So I swipe right for mid-table. You're swiping right if you're a top 6 side. Wow. Let's move on. Hal Robson-Kanu, who is a free agent after being released by West Brom. Someone who was absolutely fantastic in the season that the Albion got promoted. Didn't play as much last season in the Premier League for them, but I think he'd be a decent pickup for plenty of Championship teams, Justin.
It's really difficult sometimes to judge these players, mainly because of their age. And sometimes they're in teams the season before where they're surrounded by younger, more skillful players. And I think Hal Robson-Kanu falls into that category a little bit. He was part of a West Brom side when they got promoted a couple of seasons ago under Bilic, where he had players who were creating an abundance of chances, and he displayed much better form than Charlie Austin did. But he suited the number 9 role better than he did, because of his.
He's a manager. He's a manager's dream, isn't he?
I wouldn't say that.
In terms of work rate and putting themselves about, that's what I mean.
Yeah, work rate, intelligence as well. Yes, maybe not so in terms of discipline. I mean, he was kicked out of the Wales team. I think in the last international breaks he broke COVID rules, so maybe not a manager's dream in that sense. But would I go for him? I don't think I would. Maybe a lower mid-table Championship side, but I don't think Hal Robson-Kanu would drop to one of those. He's had one good season out of about 10 as well. I don't know. I've got a lot of question marks about him.
I'd be looking to sign him up if I was a top half Championship side. I think he's, as I say, works ridiculously hard, relatively quick, can play in a number of positions across the front 3. So I'd definitely be looking to get Robson-Kanu in, because I think he's a class player at this level. Next up is Izzy Brown, Justin. Izzy Brown, who has just come off the back of a loan spell at Sheffield Wednesday. Not a particularly successful one, and has now finally been released by Chelsea after being there for God knows how many years. What kind of level do you think Izzy Brown will be at next season?
It's an interesting one because he played for Huddersfield when they got promoted. That's where he earned his name. And then he went to Leeds and was injured, and surprisingly made an appearance in the playoff semi-final. Came out of nowhere. But again, he was injured. And then the form he displayed at Luton under Graham Jones, he was incredible up until he got injured. The amount of chances he was creating, the amount of assists he picked up, he was really, really good. But then the spell at Wednesday last season was a bit of a disaster for him. And I'm gutted for him because I really like him as a player. I think he can do a job. But he's a player, again, a lot of Chelsea loanees who spend a long time out will fall into the same category, where they just, I don't know, where they start to hate football, I imagine, where they're just being passed around. So I think if he gets a 2-year deal somewhere, like maybe Luton again, it might work out. If he goes back there, I think he can do a good job for a team competing to get into the top half.
Yeah, it seems from what I've been seeing anyway that he wasn't particularly happy with how his Wednesday spell went, more off the pitch than on the pitch. Well, I suppose he's not too happy with the on the pitch side of things either. But it seems like he's the kind of player who just needs to find a home. Just needs to find one club where he can actually stay instead of being loaned out all over the place. And then you might be able to actually get some good out of him because, as you say, he's had 2 loan spells off the top of my head, Huddersfield and Luton, where he was fairly productive, and then 2 other loan spells, Leeds and Wednesday, where it just didn't really work out at all. So we saw at Luton what kind of player he can be, because he was a creative mastermind at Luton, where he was given that chance to be the centre of everything. Wednesday last season didn't really get a look in. So I think if you're a side expecting to be just above the relegation zone next season in the Championship, I'd be looking to get him in. So I'd be swiping right. Are you swiping right?
I'm swiping right, yeah. There's a player in there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Next up is Mario Vrancic. This is one player who he was released by Norwich in the summer. Again, another one I wasn't expecting to actually be released by their clubs. Another one who I'm not particularly expecting to stay in England, But for the sake of this episode, say if he were to be playing in England next season, do you think it'd be a good pickup for a championship side?
I think it depends what system and style of play you deploy. I don't think there'd be many teams he'd look well in. Can you imagine him playing for a Mick McCardiff? Mick McCardiff.
Mick McCardiff.
There you go. There's a couple of episode names next season. Mick McCarthy's Cardiff side. I don't think I can see him playing for them, for example. I'm just trying to look down the list. The closest one maybe might be Huddersfield. I don't know.
I was gonna say Huddersfield. For some reason, that just stands out as a match made in heaven. Probably because of the German era where they were just signing players from that kind of part of the country. They don't seem to be going down that route anymore. But Huddersfield just stands out as the kind of club where Mario Vrancic would fit in.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think again, it's a similar style of play off the ball for Falk ball and court brown ball, to coin a couple of phrases. So he might fit in there, but as you say, I don't think I can see him staying in England. I think he might head back to Germany. He's a cultured left-footed midfielder. They don't tend to last very long after sort of 30, 31. They tend to sort of wind down a little bit. Alman Abdi is another one that falls into that category of cultured left-footed midfielders. I mean, I'd swipe right because he's a quality player, but I don't think you'd get a lot out of him throughout the season. He's been a bit part player for Norwich as well. He's not
played quite a bit.
A lot of games off the bench.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about a side which has walked off with the championship title. So he's played quite a bit. He's clearly quite a good player. I'd be saying vast majority of championship clubs should be swiping right on him. I really would.
Yeah, I think in that context, yes. But again, I don't think you're going to I don't think you could sign him to be your first choice number 10, for example.
Each to their own. I'm swiping right. Justin's swiping right.
I'm going to swipe left.
Oh, wow. Okay, fair enough. No. Next up is Britta Sombalonga, a player who has been prolific at championship level for quite some time. Those figures seem to have dwindled a bit in recent years, Justin.
Yeah, and I think the most telling thing is over the last 2 seasons, surprisingly, Borough haven't been that bad at creating chances. So it might be more down to player confidence because at Forest, for example, he was playing in some really poor teams for Forest, but he was still putting them away. One of the goals that stick out to mind is his goal against Ipswich, where he does a couple of step overs, takes it onto his left foot and powers it into the top left-hand corner. Yeah, top left-hand corner. So that's his ability, but it's not. His move to Borough just hasn't worked out. At what, 12, 15 million pounds?
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money, and it just seems to have, I don't know, maybe played on his mind a little bit, which is a massive shame because he's a great player, and I mean he can do a job at championship level, absolutely for any club, even if you're in the top 6. Would he be a backup option?
I don't think he'd be settling as a backup option.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
I would say the issue is with Britta Sombalonga is he's obviously would have been on a hell of a lot of money at Middlesbrough, as you say. He moved for 15 million. So I think the wage is going to match that kind of transfer fee. And therefore, he's going to have to take a pay cut if he does want to stay at championship level, because based off the 2 seasons that he's just had, particularly last season, clubs aren't going to be willing to put out, 15 grand a week for him, I don't think. But having said that, if you're a side who is looking for a striker and know someone like Preston, for example, then he'd be a brilliant signing if you manage to get him on reduced wages. It's just a big old if. I could maybe see him going abroad if he can't find a gig in the championship. But, I mean, if you manage to get the best out of Britta Sombalonga, then wow, oh wow, you've got one hell of a striker at championship level.
Yeah, without doubt. He's a player who can finish, and he just needs a run of games where he's scoring goals, and he will hit 15, 20 easily. He's that sort of striker. But for some reason, it's not worked out at Borough. These things happen. You move on, and I think his next club, wherever it is, I think he will score goals for them, definitely.
He's one of the players I'm most interested to see where he ends up Because if he does end up at championship level, then his career is going to be under the microscope, isn't it? I'm going to swipe right if he manages to put his wage demands down a bit. Are you swiping right?
Swipe right, yeah. If you can pick him a backup option for top six, first choice for sort of mid to lower table, and it's a bit of a pipe dream for lower half clubs, but they definitely snap him up. So yeah, it's a definite swipe right.
Fair play. Ahmed El Mohammadi, someone who's a very experienced player at this point. How old is he now? He must be about mid-30s. He's got promoted from the championship a couple of times. Would you be looking to swipe right for him?
I'd swipe left.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I don't think he was great at Villa, and I felt like his move to Villa might have been, his wind down, because it was very much backup for Villa, or viewed as the backup, especially over the last 2 seasons behind Gilbert and Matty Cash. And when you spend a long time as a backup, can you jump straight back into first team action? Probably not. And plus, he's a very unique player where he plays best when he's a wing back in a back three. I don't think he's a very good fullback, and he's definitely not a right midfielder. I think he's much better as a wing back when a team deploys a back three, and that limits your options in the championship.
And in addition to that, he is getting on a bit now. So has he got those legs to, still play as a wing back? I'm not too sure. I kind of agree with you. I think I'd be swiping left if I was him. Also got to be on a fair whack in terms of wages. So yeah, I don't really see too many plus points for El Mohammadi.
I really like him. He's a bit of a shithouse, and he's very loud and always plays with a bit of smile. But yeah, the age thing, the tactical, you have to show him in somewhere. So yeah, I'd swipe left.
Has got promoted from the championship quite a few times, in fairness to him.
It has, yeah.
More than most of the players on this list. But yeah, I'll be swiping left. Next up is John Lundstrom, who's just been released by Sheffield United. A very versatile player, Justin, has come off the back of what was a very good first season in the Premier League with Sheffield United. Not as good in the second season. And I think he has been linked with a move to Rangers. But championship clubs, should they be looking?
Maybe. I think there's a little bit of I don't know, something surrounding him that I'm not convinced by. I wasn't convinced by him in his first season, although he did score me a lot of points in fantasy football for Sheffield United. But I'm just not convinced by him. And I'd like some Sheffield United fans to try and educate me, because I've seen him quite a few times, but I just can't put my finger on why I don't quite rate him.
I think it'd be a good signing for pretty much every championship side, not necessarily as someone who's going to play week in, week out for those at the very top, but in terms of a squad player, I don't see why not. I think Sheffield United wants to keep a hold of him, which says how good of a player he is. It's clear that he maybe just fancied a move elsewhere, and another championship side, why not?
I think he's just a player that runs hard and tackles hard. And
sometimes that's all you got to do, Justin.
That is true. That I mean, Neil Warnock's probably salivating at the thought. I don't know. I'm not convinced by him, and I'm swapping left, and I can't explain why. And I apologise to everyone, but there's just something about him that I just don't rate, and I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know.
Fair enough. I'll be swiping right. Absolutely. Next up is Andre Wisdom, someone you know very well, Justin, has just come off the back of a decent season at Derby. It's been there for a few seasons now. Experienced player at championship level. Would you? I mean, it's not been said for sure yet whether he's actually leaving Derby or not. But as a Derby fan, would you like to keep a hold of him?
If he reduces his wages, yes. I think he's a very good defensive fullback. I think that's where you get the best out of him. His form under Guy Rowett, when he was deployed as a defensive fullback, he was very, very good. As a centre half, no. As a squad player, centre half, as like a third option, maybe yes. He's got the habit of switching off, but there is a player in there. He's experienced now. He's a bit of a leader as well. And as well as that, you don't push him off the ball very often, as many Derby fans will tell you. I'd swipe right because I think he'd be a good squad player for any team in the championship. But as a first choice, maybe not.
No, I'm kind of the same. I think if I was a bottom half championship side, I'd look at him and think could be a decent backup. Apart from that, I don't really see much else for him. He can play in a number of positions, as you say, around the back of the defence. But apart from that, I'm not too keen on him, I've got to say.
If you're a defensive team and you deploy him as a right back and you don't expect too much from him going forward, then yeah, absolutely, he's your first choice. But there are too many teams in the league that don't play that, don't utilize those roles in their teams. They like their fullbacks to attack, and Andre Wisdom's efforts in the final third aren't the best. So yeah, it comes down to that. If you deploy him as a defensive right back, then yes, go for it. Any other role, then you're struggling.
I'm swiping left, I'm afraid. You swiping left?
I'm going to swipe right. He's a good defender, and that's it.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on, Henry Lansbury, who has been up straight out there. Fair enough. Henry Lansbury, who was on loan at Bristol City most recently, has had quite a few loan spells now. He was at Villa after a big old move, which didn't really work out. It didn't really pull up many trees at Bristol City last season, did he?
No, it was really poor last season at Bristol City. Obviously, Bristol City were arguably the worst team in the second half of the season, based January 1st to the end of the season, and he played most of the games, most of the games that he played were in the second half of the season. I can't recall him ever playing for Villa. I mean, he's probably clocked up appearances, but I cannot envisage him in a Villa shirt at all.
Fair enough. You're absolutely right. He was very poor at Bristol City last season, and it's surprising, really, because he was so good when he was at Forest all those years ago. He really was. And now I look at him and just think, where has that player gone? I'd be swiping left.
Yeah, swipe left.
Maybe as a backup, if you could get him on reduced wages, but I can't see anything else. But yeah, I'd be swiping left on Henry Lansbury. Moses Odebarju, whose most famous moment last season came when he congratulated Lewis Grabban on scoring a goal against Sheffield Wednesday, which I completely forgot about until I was researching for this. What are you thinking on Odebarju?
I'm going to swipe left. I think he's a player who could do with dropping down a division and picking up games. That injury it was at Hull when he tore his ACL. He's not been the same player, which is a massive shame, because when he was at Brentford, he was fantastic. Up until he got injured at Hull, he was ridiculously good. And yeah, it's a massive shame. Even the form he displayed in his early games at Wednesday, we thought, well, hang on, he might be coming back here, but yeah, just the form in the last season has been really poor. So I think he's one of those that could drop down a level for me. I'd swipe left.
Yeah, I'd definitely be swiping left. I pretty much agree with what you were saying. He was fantastic at Brentford. Looked like he was going to be a star, but yeah, not really worked out for him, unfortunately. Next up is Christopher Schindler, who obviously massive legend at Huddersfield after getting them promoted a few years ago now, actually. Not really done too much else since in the Championship.
I mean, he's had injuries. I mean, I was surprised that he left. But then again, if you've had a lot of injuries and you're one of the big earners at Huddersfield, then they're not going to see value there. So he's probably one that's going to head back to Germany. I'd swipe left. I think it comes down to his age and the injuries that he sustained. I don't think there'll be too many willing to pay him for what you get back.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I would definitely be swiping left on Christopher Schindler. Been a fantastic player at Championship level. I just don't really see much value for money in getting him in, to be quite honest. He's had his best years. Don't think he'll be in the Championship next season anyway. So yeah, I'll be swiping left on him as well. We're flying through these now, Justin. Let's move on. Next one, Dan Crowley. Was at Birmingham for 2 seasons. First season, quite promising. Second season, not as much. What are you thinking, Justin?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dan Crowley's. I think he's brilliant. I was surprised that Birmingham City let him go, given their creative struggles. But then again, I don't know whether that was a Karanka decision. I know his form wasn't great in the first half of the season, but he's still a very good player. I think even now, as a Derby fan, I'd be going, just take a chance on him. Every time I've watched him, I've been impressed, albeit, I'm not watching him regularly, but when I have seen him play, he's been good. He's good at set pieces. He's good with the ball at his feet. He's a technical midfielder. I think if you can unlock his potential, I think you've got a very good player. I'd swipe right, especially sort of lower championship to mid-table. I'd be swiping right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Can play in the middle of the park, can play on the wing. Yeah. He loves to dribble, good passer of the ball. Why not? Could be a good player there. So yeah, I'd be swiping right on him. He's the kind of player that, as you say, Birmingham would look to be signing, really. So yeah, it's a bit surprised that they got rid of him, although I imagine he's not too happy considering he's not really played much recently. Robbie Brady. This is a really interesting one. He's someone who's had a bad injury recently, but if you manage to get him fit, then that wand of a left foot could be deadly in the Championship, Justin.
I think it's a very underrated left foot as well. I think people forget some of the goals he scored with it. Yeah, he's a good player, and as you say, if you can keep him fit, then yeah, you take a chance. He's I think he played 20 games for Burnley last season, scored 1 goal. I was reading about him earlier in the day, actually, which is weird. But again, he's a player who can play all up the left back, left wing back. So yeah, I think you'd be sniffing around. Maybe you do forget how old he is. I think he's 29. So that might put a few people off. But I think if you're sort of challenging for the playoffs or maybe even a top 6 team, you'd bring him in because playing all up the left, you've got a good squad player there.
I'd be saying any Championship club that does get him in, because I imagine he probably will go to a Championship club, it will make me raise my eyebrows and go, wow, that is a good signing. As we say, a couple of concerns about the injury side of things, but I remember when he was at Norwich a few years ago, he was fantastic. Set pieces, crossing, there weren't too many better at this level, and probably not too many better in the Premier League either. So yeah, I'd definitely be looking to get him in. It's just all about whether you can keep him fit, maybe get him on reduced wages as well. I mean, that kind of goes with quite a few players on this list, Justin, including this one, John Ruddy. Just been released by Wolves, who was the backup keeper, but he did get promoted with them, didn't he, in that season, that Wolves season. What are you thinking, John Ruddy?
So that was 3 years ago, and he's been a backup for those 3 years. I'd say no, based on his age and the amount of games he's played over the last 3 years. He's got top 6 third choice keeper written all over him for me.
I can see what you mean, but I think if you are a Championship side, mid-table Championship side, I'd be looking at John Ruddy and thinking, well, is he any worse than what we've got? Why not get him in? Goalkeepers is always a weird one because you don't really know how good your goalkeeper is until you give him a go between the sticks. And John Ruddy's an experienced player at this level, former England international as well, lest we forget. So yeah, I'd be thinking if I was a mid-table Championship side and we've only got one goalkeeper at the moment, bring him in. Then if he gets given a go between the sticks, he could be a bloody good player. So yeah, I'd be swiping right for pretty much every Championship side, whether that's backup or as first choice. You the same?
I'm third choice, second choice, I'd swipe right. Playing games, I'd swipe left.
Okay then. Kieran Westwood, another goalkeeper, Justin. What are you saying?
I'm swiping left. I don't need to explain this one. I think he was terrible last season.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. He got released by Sheffield Wednesday, didn't he? Didn't pull up too many trees. He was one of my favourite goalkeepers at Championship level for quite some time because he was absolutely fantastic, but it's been a long time since he was a very good goalkeeper at Championship level. So unfortunately, I think I'm the same. I'm going to swipe left on Kieran Westwood. Matt Sunday. Just been released by Rotherham. Now, he was one of the standout players for Rotherham last season for me. 23 years old, right back, loves getting up and down the right-hand side. I'd be swiping right all day, no matter what Championship side I am.
Yeah, as you say, the age is forming a team that struggled for large parts of the season and were up against it. I think he was one of the Rotherham's best players, as you say. Yeah, I'd be swiping right. And again, he's a player he's got a lot of value under his belt because obviously he's 23. Give him a 3-year deal. If he displays the form he displayed last season at Rotherham, you could get a couple of £1 million for him. So yeah, any team in the Championship should be looking at Matt Olosunde and going, let's have a look. Why not?
Yeah, I think that's the thinking why Olosunde left Rotherham, because I think he was thinking he could probably get a better deal elsewhere. Next up on the agenda is Martin Waghorn, someone you know very well, Justin, from his time at Derby. Still not officially been released by Derby yet, but as Derby fan, would you be looking to keep him around?
I would. He's one of them players who can play as a number 9, as a right winger, as a left winger, even in behind the striker. He's one that fits all the molds. I think he's a player. I think Cardiff have been heavily linked with him. I think he's a player who can do a job for teams trying to get into the top 6 and everywhere else in the league. Maybe not a Championship-looking team with a big budget, but his left foot is very good. I think last season was just a really poor season for him and Derby County overall. I'd be looking to keep him if I'm a Derby hierarchy or Wayne Rooney. It'd be a shame to see him go because his left foot is very good. It's very, very good.
I'd agree. I think last season was just a bad season for him. On the pitch, off the pitch, there were a few reports of disagreements on the training ground involving Martin Waghorn. But I think if you get him in, then you get someone who's going to work his socks off, decent finisher at this level, decent creator at this level. He's the kind of striker who is, a 6 out of 10 in every category in terms of pace, holding up the ball, all that kind of thing. So I think, he'd be a great signing for quite a few Championship clubs, even if it's just as a backup. Mm-hmm. Next up on the list, Justin, is Alex Pritchard, who's just been released by Huddersfield. What are you thinking with Alex Pritchard?
He's 28, isn't he? He's not. He's not a young player anymore. He's Brentford again. He's a player who you think of Alex Pritchard, you automatically go to that season at Brentford when they got into the playoffs, wasn't it? And he was unreal. He was ridiculously good. I think Spurs were looking to keep him around, and then he went on loan to Norwich or signed for Norwich, and it's not really happened for him since. He wasn't fancied by Corberán because Pritchard's come out himself and said he's been fit, he's been able to play, but he just hasn't. And I don't know. That might be a bit of an indictment towards him. Can he play on the wing? I don't think he can. So he's going to have to play number 10, and there are probably better number 10s in the division than him.
I would be swiping left on Alex Pritchard. I think he has been so absent now for so many years. Even when he was at Norwich and he made that big move to Huddersfield, he wasn't playing necessarily well. So it was a bit of a weird signing from a Huddersfield perspective. And as we can see, in hindsight, it's just not worked at all. It's been a pretty terrible buy, in all honesty. So, I would definitely be swiping left on Alex Pritchard. He's had his best years, hasn't he? His best years were that spell at Brentford, parts of his spell at Norwich. So I don't think I'd be looking at him as a Championship club and thinking, yes, this guy is going to get something. We can get something out of this guy, because I just don't see it anymore. He's not done anything for so long that it is hard to really see him do anything again for the foreseeable future. Next up on the list, Justin, is Jamie Patterson, who was just released by Bristol City, someone you're a big fan of.
I was. I was disappointed to see his loan spell at Derby last season be cut short. I think he displayed good form when he played, and he's a very technical player, tactically flexible as well. He can play as number 10, he can play right wing, left wing, and he displayed some really good form in central midfield for Bristol City. I think the reason why he's been let go is because his injury record last season just got the better of him, and Bristol City are pressing the reset button, which is absolutely fair enough. Any team sort of below the top 10, top 8, I think it would be a good idea to go for a player like him, because he's a very good technician.
Absolutely. absolutely right. He was unbelievable at the start of this season for Bristol City, probably one of the best players in the whole division. And then he had that bad injury, didn't he? And then he didn't really play again this season. But if they get him in, then he can produce magic, can play all across the midfield, whether it's in the centre or on the wing. He's a very good player if you manage to get the best out of him and keep him fit. There are a few question marks in both those categories, but he can take set pieces, he can dribble, he can pass. I think even as a backup for maybe even playoff chasing sides, get him in, see what he can do. I don't think he'll be asking for too much in terms of wages, so I don't really see why wouldn't you. So yeah, I'll be swiping right on those kind of terms. Next up is Jack Wilshere, who has had a interesting few years, hasn't he? He's been fairly absent, and then this spell at Bournemouth, where he's just been released from, was kind of his chance to really get his career back on track. Did he get it back on track, though?
No, I don't think he did. I don't think he did at all. I wasn't. I don't think it's all his fault. I don't think the system really helped him, especially under Woodgate. I don't think it helped him under Tyndall, and I definitely don't think it helped him under Woodgate. Because obviously under Woodgate they were playing a 4-2-3-1 where he just had two midfielders creating a shield for the back four. He's not that type of player. He's a player you want to get in possession who can. He's very good in the middle third with the ball, as everybody knows. But I don't think he can develop the consistency, because as soon as he starts developing that, the injuries start to creep in. So I'd swipe left. I think it's too much of a risk for a lot of Championship clubs.
I'd be willing to take the gamble, not on massive wages, which is what I fear he will be asking for. It wouldn't surprise me if he made the move to someone like the MLS, for example. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're a Championship club and you have a chat with him, see what he's asking. And if he's asking for, I don't know, $5,000 a week or something like that, I'm not sure if that's realistic or not, because I'm not an agent. But if that was the case, then I'd be saying, yeah, absolutely, Jack Wilshere, come on down. But I'm not sure that will be the case. If you manage to keep him fit, then he could be one hell of a player at Championship level for pretty much every side in the division. It's all about keeping him fit and also the motivation side of things. Because as we say, he didn't really pull up many trees when he was at Bournemouth last season. But I'd be swiping right. It'd be an optimistic swipe right on my behalf, but you're swiping left.
I'm swiping left. I think the romance has got the better of you.
It probably has. Next up on this list is Kamil Grosicki, Justin, who's just been released by West Brom. Wasn't too bad, was he, when he was at Hull a year and a half ago?
Yeah, I'm going to swipe left on Kamil Grosicki.
Really?
I think any winger who's over the age of 33 and you're bringing him in, are you going to get the best out of him? Because he's not one of those wingers who can slot inside when their career starts to dwindle, or he can turn into a fullback. I don't think. I wouldn't take the risk. I think he wouldn't. I think he'd ask for a fair whack in terms of wages as well.
Even for a year?
Even for a year, I wouldn't take him. You might get a few good games out of him. He might even reach double-figure goals and assists. But no, it's a no from me, I'm afraid. I'm swiping left on Kamil Grosicki.
I'm swiping right. If I'm pretty much the bottom half of the Championship, absolutely. I don't think he'd be asking for that much for wages. I mean, I say bottom half of the Championship, even if I'd say pretty much any side outside the top six, actually. He was only a year and a half ago where he was one of the best wingers in the whole of the Championship. He was ripping it up for Hull. Went to West Brom, didn't really work out because they've got an abundance of players who can play on the wing. So he was never really going to get much of a look in. But now I look at him and go, yes, please. He might be asking for a decent amount of wages, but he's not the kind of winger who has necessarily ever relied on his pace too much. He's the kind of winger who can create stuff, score goals. I don't see what your problem is with him.
I don't have a problem with him, but he's played.
What's he done to you?
Oh, clearly nothing. I just have a grudge against. I'm ageist against wingers. He's played he's played less than 20 games in the past 2 seasons, or season and a half, which is, and again at the age of 33, I think yeah, 33. I think that's too much football missed. I don't think you're going to be able to get back to a physical level that you need to in the Championship. So yeah, I think it's too big a risk. I'm going to swipe left. Again, he's a player that's got a lot of quality, but if you're throwing money at over 30s, are you getting value? I don't think you are.
I think 1 year, why not? He's worth it. Final 2, Justin. Sammy Amiobi, just been released by Forest.
I watched a montage of him this morning, actually, and it was obviously all the good bits. But with Sammy Amiobi, you've got a lot of bad bits as well, like the other 3 shots he has in the game where they go to the corner flag, to the top tier, to the other corner flag. There's no doubt he's a good player, but he's the best and worst player you'll have in your team.
He is very quick. He can dribble, does shoot a lot, but can perform.
That's an understatement.
But he can perform the spectacular. I'd be thinking it for the vast majority of Championship clubs, he'd be a decent signing. Not necessarily as someone who's going to play week in, week out, but the higher you get up, the more he becomes more of a backup. But what a backup he would be. At Forest, he was pretty good. He was better than I was expecting him to be. But I think, he'd be a brilliant signing for the vast majority of Championship sides.
I'm going to swipe right. And the only reason why I'm going to swipe right is because he's going to entertain me. He's going to keep me happy.
His massive limbs.
Oh yeah, his limbs are great. But going away from his physique, he has got the ability to turn something out of nothing, but also he's got the ability to do something really shit. You question how he became a professional footballer. So that's why I said he's the best and worst player you're ever going to have in your team. So yeah, why not swipe right? I think it'd be worth the laughs.
That's right. I think he's inconsistent, but when you find that 1 in every 5 games, he is a brilliant player. Final one on the list, Justin. Andy Carroll. A head shake from Justin Peach. Why are you giving that response to such a legend, an England legend like Andy Carroll?
Has he done anything with his feet in the last 6 years, 7 years? He's a man. He's literally, all he can do is head the ball. That's
but what a head. What a head.
If he he'd be great playing head tennis on the training ground.
He's
fantastic.
got a couple of wonder goals. He scored an overhead kick, I recall, not too long ago for West Ham. Yeah,
but again, it's a flash in the pan, isn't it? It doesn't happen often. This is why he's been released by 2 clubs in the last 2 years. It's a no. Again, he's a player who's had a dogged injury record, and it's really sad because he's the archetypal number 9 that England fans or English people love. But yeah, no way for me. I'm not going anywhere near Andy Carroll. It's a
no way. You're saying no way to Andy Carroll, ex-England international Andy Carroll. You're telling
he's not retired yet.
You're telling me. I said, I'm not sure his England career is going to get much of a look, and I'm not sure Gareth Southgate's keeping on track. But you're telling me Neil Warnock would not love a bit of Andy Carroll up front?
I don't think he would, I think Neil Warnock
get out of here.
I think he sees through it.
No, not having that at all. Andy Carroll, he would be a beast at Championship level. If admittedly, injury record is a concern, but if he stays fit, Andy Carroll in the Championship, he would be half the managers in the Championship. He would be their dream signing.
No, what he should do is he should drop to centre half. He should do what Dean Dublin did later on in his career. He should drop and become a centre half because all he can do is head it and kick it. There's nothing else to his game, unfortunately, and it's a damning indictment of Andy Carroll, and it's a shame we are finishing on such a negative point for me. But I think any team who goes near Andy Carroll, your recruitment team needs sacking.
That is sacrilege from you. You should be ashamed. I think Andy Carroll will be a fantastic signing. Admittedly, wages, injury record, a bit of a concern. Played more games at Newcastle last season than I thought he did.
How many goals did he score?
Well, he didn't score that many, but that's because he's living off scraps at Newcastle.
Come on.
I think he'd be a great signing. I really, really do. Anyway, there we go. We're all out of potential matches. So this has been Free Agent Tinder on the second tier. Thank you for listening wherever you are. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have as well. I wasn't sure whether how it sounds, but there we go. It's an experience for all of us. This is our last episode of this in this kind of setup. We're going to have a bit of a break for now, but the content isn't stopping there, ladies and gentlemen. For the next few weeks, we've got a series of meets episode lined up for you. We've got championship legends as well as current players in the championship, and that starts on Thursday with a player who won his club's Player of the Season award this past season. All very exciting indeed. So you'll next hear from us together in the near future, but otherwise we hope you enjoy the meets episodes, which are coming over the coming weeks. If that doesn't do enough to fill your second tier craving, then make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, because we're hopefully going to be doing loads of content on there over the summer. So head on over there to get involved with that. Otherwise, Justin, this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I'll be Justin Peach.
Thank you for listening.